Hi, I'm Dr. Annalene Weston, dental legal consultant at Dental Protection. Welcome to Riskbites, a series of podcasts created specifically for dental practitioners in Australia. Riskbites looks at the key dental legal risks and issues affecting dental practitioners across Australia and provides helpful advice and guidance on how to steer clear of them, leaving you free to provide safe and high-quality dental care for your patients. In this episode, we're going to be chatting with my colleague, Anita Kemp, who's one of our case managers. And she also works behind the scenes with me on our podcast series, for which I am incredibly grateful because I really couldn't do it without you, Anita. So thank you. Now, being that this is our last podcast for 2024, we thought we might do something a little bit different. So Anita, can you elaborate on this for me a little bit more?
I'd love to, Annalene. I think you'd agree, we tend to focus a lot on risk and we spend a considerable amount of time assisting members with complaints, helping them to manage and navigate situations that can be emotive and stressful in nature.
Yeah, we certainly do. And I think we've all noticed that there seems to have been a sharp increase in the number of patient complaints or particular types of complaints being dealt with by our members, some of which seem to really quickly escalate and become quite volatile, and often without any seeming rhyme or reason.
I know. And look, I think it's fair to say that society as a whole has noticed a shift in people's threshold or tolerance for dealing with anything outside of their comfort zone or that doesn't align with their perspective, values and beliefs. But more specifically in our world, our DPL world that is, there seems to be this low tolerance for dealing with stressful or unexpected outcomes. If we think about it, we're confronted on a daily basis with global injustices and discourse, changes to our environment and potentially our way of life. Even rises in the old cosy live situation seems to be causing tension, and as tension seems to rise, conciliation seems to be taking a backseat as a consequence. It seems as though when things don't work out the way one plans or anticipate, it feels as though there needs to be a villain, and this might seem a bit harsh, but the general consensus is that someone has to be at fault or someone has to be to blame.
Yeah, it does feel that way sometimes. And in some of the cases we deal with, you could even take it one step further. In cases where there's a belief that blame or fault can be apportioned, it's not uncommon for the disgruntled patient to expect, rightly or wrongly, remediation of treatment and in some cases, some form of compensation.
This is true. And it can be a tough place to be in when your intentions are always well-meaning and you find yourself painted as a villain. Without even contemplating the clinical aspects of care, being a well-rounded, caring and kind person, practitioner, colleague and employer can sometimes feel like an overwhelming and tireless position to be in.
Yeah, and some might even say thankless.
I know, a bit like a parent really. And this all sounds really bleak, and while it can be true, this is not the message we wanted to leave everyone with before we headed into the festive season.
Yeah, well, it's fair to acknowledge it exists, but I was definitely starting to get some Grinch vibes there, Anita.
I know, hence why I wanted to share a case that's pushed back on this really type of solemn narrative and shown that people who are our patients can be fair, thoughtful and surprising in a good way. That great outcomes can be achieved, and though it does require effort, when it happens, it certainly rekindles our faith and passion in our role as dental practitioner and healer.
Brilliant, because I love a feel-good story. So tell me more.
Right, well, this case involves a young practitioner. Now, I won't go into all the details, but essentially our member provided 2 crowns on lower molars. Unfortunately, the patient suffered a vertical root fracture in one of the teeth and an infection in the other, a few months after post-insert. After consulting with specialists, the patient was advised that both teeth had a very poor prognosis and extraction was recommended. The patient contacted the practice expressing his discontent, and this was further complicated by the fact that our member had moved on from the practice. The patient explained that the crowns were only in for a very short time, and he was now faced with having to undergo implant treatment and restoration, an additional cost he had not expected. The practice contacted our young dentist, who had been an employee at the time, to notify him of the complaint. Unfortunately, the practice chose not to offer any assistance, leaving our young member to solely manage the complaint alone and bear the cost of any financial refund or assistance.
Yeah, that's not nice at all. And I can see how this entire matter is going to be upsetting for everyone involved.
Yes, and in spite of all of this, our member's priority was to offer his help. He put himself in his patient's shoes, and together we wrote a really honest and sincere letter to the patient, empathising with what had occurred and assuring the patient that the member wanted to help where he could. He made a genuine offer to refund the amount he'd personally received, while also acknowledging that there was a considerable gap between this and what the patient had paid. So, as a gesture of goodwill, he offered to include the lab fees as well.
Okay, well, that was very generous of him.
We wanted to be completely transparent about the numbers, so we clearly set out the calculations out for the patient to consider. To be honest, we weren't sure how the patient would respond, given his initial correspondence and discussions with the practice had been quite punchy, and he seemed really upset.
It's always been my position that transparency is a key in these situations, Anita. And I think when people are provided with clear and honest information, they're able to draw their own conclusion, which often seems to bode well for all involved.
And that's exactly what happened. To our surprise, the patient wrote a beautiful email back, thanking the member for taking the time to express his genuine empathy, offer a conciliatory solution, and provide a clear explanation of the calculations that sat behind the amount or the refund offered. He explained that after reviewing the calculations, he simply couldn't take the young dentist's money, and knowing he'd offered more than he'd received. He went on to say that it was only money, and humanity seemed more important. His parting words were just as lovely and encouraging. He said that based on the way our member had conducted himself, he believed he would have a very successful career.
Oh, how lovely. What a great outcome.
Honestly, Annalene, this really got me. So often in this role, we're confronted with challenging situations that don't always end well. As we head into the festive season and the end of the year, I think it's really important to reflect on these feel-good moments. And I honestly hope all of our members have at least one patient, moment, or case of their own that they can recall and feel good about as they close out the year.
Yeah, that's great. And I agree, Anita. And I think that patient was right. Humanity is important. So thanks so much, Anita, and thank you all for listening. And I wish you all a pleasant and safe festive season. We really do hope this podcast was helpful to you, and we look forward to sharing more guidance with you in the future. If you like dental protection podcasts and you'd like to hear more, please subscribe and leave a review.